Welcome to Monday, May 4th. Thanks for tuning in to the Day Weather Podcast. Well, summer's not here yet, folks. I know it's been tantalizingly close and been feeling like it lately, but as we've been warning you, you always got to get through the middle to the end of May before we're in the clear, and we'll show you that here in a moment. Now, this week is going to be mild, but not as warm as last week. It's not going to be terrible, but we kind of got spoiled last week with all those warm temperatures. We have a cold front due Thursday and Friday. Very cold May weather is tantalizingly close to us by this weekend and into early next week. We continue to need to keep an eye on it. We talked about this on Friday, that there was going to be a big plunge of unseasonably cold air heading into the nation's midsection during the middle to the end of this week and over Mother's Day weekend, and that's still on tap. One thing, we're going to show you a global temperature drop. That's right, a global temperature drop. You'll not hear this anywhere else, but I want to show you something that ties in to our solar activity that we talked about. We'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. Now, here is a shot from the Snowy Range Mountains, just under 9,000 feet. Well, several inches of snow fell overnight in the Snowy Range Mountains. Cameron Pass in northern Colorado got snowed on, so some late season snows up into the high country after a good solid week of significant melting. We have seen a significant rise in creeks, rivers, and streams. The North Platte River at Saratoga now up at 6.5 feet. So that's up over a foot in less than a week's time. Here's your precipitation forecast through Thursday. You can see it's favoring those areas that were favored with this weekend rain, from the Pacific Northwest stretching across the northern and central Rockies, mainly along and north of I-70. That's where the action's going to be this week as well. We continue to be concerned about southern Colorado south of I-70 with its continued dryness. And I think that is something, unfortunately, that may linger into summer. We'll watch it for you, but it's a trend we don't like to see. North of I-70, it's a different story, as that pattern is going to be more wet. We're going to start off the first half of this week with really not a lot of weather. We'll have some showers around today, Tuesday and Wednesday across the Intermountain West and the High Plains. Looks to be mild and fairly quiet. This is where we are today. We've got this little trough coming through the Intermountain West. This is what brought the rain and thunderstorm activity last night and overnight and early this morning. But you can see we've got a high pressure ridge trying to build in here with this big low that's off the west coast. Here's the bad area of cold, really cold air with an upper level low up there in Canada that is going to be wanting to go this way like we showed you last week. Now by Thursday, we've got another trough coming in. This is part of this system here. It breaks off, comes up and down, and this is the cold front that's going to bring showers, thunderstorms, and cooler weather our way Thursday and Friday. So temperatures drop at the end of the week. Notice this vortex of cold up here and another one up here. This guy right here basically breaks off from this area of cold up here, and look how far south it goes very quickly, into the upper Great Lakes near Lake Superior by Thursday. By Friday night into Saturday, we see high pressure build right along the west coast of Canada. Then look at the trajectory of air again. Yikes. That trajectory of air is coming right out of northwest Canada, and it's coming along and east of the Continental Divide. What we're going to find out here late this week and over the weekend is that if you live west of the Continental Divide, you're going to be warm. If you're east of the Continental Divide, you are going to get colder. Look at these temperatures coming up here relative to average by Saturday. Oh my goodness. This is extremely cold. The big purple monster is back, but notice it's centered over the Great Lakes, headed towards the east coast, but even getting down into the Gulf Coast. We talked about the Continental Divide. That's what the Continental Divide can do for you. That big old mountain barrier can block cold air masses because cold air goes closer to the ground, it's more dense, and it's got to get deep enough to get over the mountains. So it's going to get downright hot. California, Arizona, the desert Southwest. Notice from Alaska along the west slope of the Canadian Rockies to the west coast, it's really warm. But this is off the charts cold. So Barney's back, the big purple monster. We do not want to see Barney anymore, but he has made a repeat appearance. This is by Mother's Day Sunday. Notice there really isn't much relief. The colder air does back up here into Colorado and Wyoming a little bit more. So it is likely going to cool off considerably by the weekend based on the latest trends, with the worst of the cold not here, but in this part of the country here. There could be lake effect snow in May in the Great Lakes in parts of the northeastern United States. That is really, really cold for early May. This is what the snowfall forecast looks like between now and the middle of next week. So you can see, yes, mountain snow and some snow maybe on the plains. So again, we've got to get past the second and third week of May before we can really breathe easy. That's usually the case despite the record heat that we experienced in many areas late last week. Now, I wanted to end on this solar activity because things we've been talking about are coming to fruition. First of all, sunspot activity has gone away. We had 3 sunspots at one moment in time last week, but over the weekend, sunspots went away, although this little circle here shows maybe one forming. But one thing we've been talking about over the last several months is that we're deep into solar minimum, the biggest solar minimum in over 100 years, and that there is a connection between solar minimums and global temperatures. It's not a one-to-one thing where you get no sunspots and automatically it cools off. It takes time because the ocean basins tend to cool off during solar minimums, because during solar minimums you have as much as 2% more cloud cover, especially over the ocean basins, which cool things off gradually. What I want to show you here is the right end of this scale. What we're showing you here are from the University of Alabama at Huntsville, satellite-based global temperature measurements. The satellite-based temperature measurements are much more reliable than the standard thermometers, which have been used for a long time, because thermometers on the ground are biased towards urban heat island. Thermometers are put at airports. You get all this heat contamination, but satellite's a better representation of what's going on. However, we only have satellite data back to 1979, so it's not a very long record. But I want to show you what's gone on here over the last 2 months with global temperatures. For April, the global temperature was pretty warm, about 0.4 degrees Celsius above normal, which normal would be this 0 line. But notice what happened from February's global temperatures relative to average, which were as much as 0.7 of a degree above average globally, has dropped all the way down to 0.38. Now, this is still warm. Notice the graph here. Notice that global temperatures since 2012 have been above the 30-year average. But this drop in temperature right here is the biggest 2-month drop on record. It's only just slightly behind this drop here. Now, interesting enough, if you go back, let's look at solar minimums. Reaching a solar minimum in 2020, reaching a solar minimum in 2009, reaching a solar minimum 1998 to 1999. Let's go back to this. Look at the global drop in temperature just as we get to the solar minimum and just beyond it. Right here, we see the temperatures drop, and we see the temperatures drop again. Correlation is pretty strong. So this solar activity is making an impact. Some people are going to argue that. I think it's definitely up for argument, but the correlation is definitely there that these solar minimums have long-term impacts on the weather. So we'll be watching these temperature anomalies as we go through the rest of 2020 and into 2021. If we continue to see this drop, and we likely will, all you got to do is go back and look at these other solar minimums to see where the temperatures drop. It's pretty predictable. This drop in global temperatures will make the Pacific colder, which definitely points to likely La Nina, late fall, early winter, 2020-2021. So this does not mean there's an ice age coming. Global temperatures are still above normal, but they are definitely responding to the solar activity. Thanks for listening and watching the Day Weather Podcast. We'll be talking to you on Tuesday. Have a good